The intergalactic survival class stood in awe as their shuttle descended through the dense, swirling snowstorms of Cryos. The icy planet was an inhospitable world where temperatures plunged to life-threatening lows and the atmosphere bit at exposed skin like shards of glass. Taylor, the lone human in the group, adjusted the thick thermal suit and peered out of the fogged-up visor. Around them, their alien classmates, hailing from a dozen different species, prepared their advanced survival equipment with the utmost confidence. Their professor, a tall reptilian being named Zaire, stood at the helm of the group, her voice booming over the roaring winds. "This is your challenge," Zaire announced, her vertical pupils narrowing as she surveyed the group. "You must locate a sustainable food source within 48 hours without reliance on any powered technologies. Consider it a test of adaptability. I doubt most of you will succeed." The group murmured among themselves, and Taylor couldn't help but notice the subtle smirks exchanged between their classmates. The Klin, a race known for their advanced bioscanners, tapped at wrist-mounted devices that emitted faint blue glows. The Hulgur, bulky beings with thick fur and a knack for brute force, grunted in approval as they tested their clawed gloves, designed for digging through snow. Even the delicate Yolora, a species whose translucent wings quivered in the cold, relied on portable devices to shield them from the elements. Taylor, however, had arrived with nothing but a small pack of basic tools, a sharp knife, some rope, and a bundle of fire-starting materials. "Primitive," sneered an Andoran student, whose pale, luminescent skin shimmered in the faint light of Krios's twin moons. "I don't see how a human expects to survive on this planet. No thermal generators, no bioscanners. What do you have, rocks and sticks?" Taylor met the Andoran's gaze but said nothing. It wasn't the first time they had been underestimated. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy was a curious one. Resilient, yes, but often dismissed as crude and reliant on outdated methods. Taylor tightened their gloves and stepped off the shuttle, their boots crunching against the hardened ice beneath them. The air was bitterly cold, and each breath sent a puff of condensation into the freezing wind. "Enough chatter," Professor Zaire barked. "Spread out. You have your coordinates. Remember, the objective is not just survival, but resourcefulness. Impress me." The students dispersed in different directions, their glowing devices and sleek gear cutting through the dense fog. Taylor trudged away from the group, heading toward a ridge that overlooked a frozen expanse below. The wind howled as Taylor scanned the horizon, noting the jagged peaks in the distance and the shimmering surface of what appeared to be a frozen lake. If there was any chance of finding sustenance, Taylor reasoned, the lake would be the place to start. It was a gamble, but one worth taking. As they descended the icy slope, the wind seemed to grow fiercer, pushing against Taylor with relentless force. Each step was a struggle, their boots threatening to slide on the slick surface. But they pressed on, clutching a sturdy walking stick they had fashioned from a branch back on the shuttle. It wasn't much, but it provided balance against the unsteady terrain. Finally reaching the lake's edge, Taylor crouched and examined the surface. The ice was thick, its opaque sheen hinting at its formidable strength. Still, there was a faint sense of movement beneath, a barely perceptible shift that suggested the possibility of life in the frigid waters below. Taylor straightened and looked around. There were no tracks, no signs of life, only the vast emptiness of Krios stretching in every direction. But something told Taylor they were on the right track. Setting their pack down, they retrieved the sharp knife and began to scrape at the ice. The sound of metal against frozen water was harsh, a grating noise that echoed across the silent expanse. Progress was slow, and Taylor's hands grew numb despite the thermal gloves. They paused occasionally to warm their fingers, blowing on them as they surveyed their work. As the hours dragged on, Taylor's progress drew the attention of some of their classmates. A group of Klin students, returning from their own fruitless search, stopped at the ridge to watch. Their bioscanners, designed to detect even the faintest traces of organic material, had yielded nothing but disappointment. Spotting Taylor's manual labor, they laughed and called out, their voices carrying easily over the open space. "Still trying, human? You won't get through that ice before the challenge ends. Maybe you should have brought one of those sticks you're so proud of." Taylor ignored them, focusing on the task at hand. The blade struck the ice with a steady rhythm, each strike a testament to their determination. The Clint eventually grew bored and moved on, their laughter fading into the distance. Alone again, Taylor finally broke through the first layer of ice, revealing a darker, slightly translucent surface below. Encouraged, they redoubled their efforts, chipping away until a small hole formed, just wide enough to peer into. The water beneath was eerily still, its black surface reflecting the faint light above. Taylor fashioned a makeshift fishing line using the rope and a sharpened piece of metal from their pack, tying it securely before lowering it into the icy depths. Patience, they reminded themselves, was the key. They sat beside the hole, their breath forming clouds as they waited. Minutes turned into hours, and the cold began to seep into their bones. Still, Taylor remained vigilant, their eyes fixed on the line. The moment came suddenly, a sharp tug that nearly pulled the line from Taylor's hands. Heart pounding, they tightened their grip and began to reel it in. The struggle was intense, the weight of the catch threatening to snap the line. But Taylor held firm, using every ounce of strength to pull the creature from the depths. Finally, with a triumphant heave, they lifted a shimmering fish from the hole. Its scales glistened with an otherworldly iridescence, and its gills flared as it struggled against the cold air. For a moment, Taylor simply stared, the enormity of their success sinking in. They had done it, proved that life could exist even in the harshest conditions. Holding the fish aloft, Taylor allowed themselves a small smile. The challenge was far from over, but this victory was a start. Unbeknownst to Taylor, Professor Zaire had been watching from a distance, her keen eyes narrowing as she observed the human's resourcefulness. Perhaps, she murmured to herself, there's more to these humans than meets the eye. The wind swept relentlessly across the frozen plains of Cryos, carrying with it a biting chill that seemed to seep through every layer of Taylor's thermal suit. Hours had passed since the small triumph at the lake, and the shimmering alien fish now rested in a makeshift pouch, wrapped in insulating fabric to preserve it against the elements. Despite the growing ache in their muscles and the exhaustion creeping into their bones, Taylor couldn't afford to rest. They had to prepare for the long night ahead, where temperatures would plummet even further and test every ounce of their resolve. As Taylor surveyed the area, they noticed the sun, or rather the dim pale orb that served as Cryos' sun, beginning to sink toward the jagged horizon. It cast an eerie glow across the landscape, turning the ice into a sea of muted blues and silvers. Shadows stretched long and thin, and the silence was profound, broken only by the occasional groan of the ice shifting beneath its own weight. Taylor knew that survival on Cryos was not just about finding food. Shelter was equally critical. Without a barrier against the encroaching cold, the victory of securing sustenance would mean nothing. They scanned the terrain for any natural formations that could offer protection. To the north, a cluster of ice boulders jutted out of the ground like the spines of some ancient beast. The shapes were irregular and promising, perhaps capable of providing the cover they needed. Adjusting their pack and tightening the straps to secure their tools, Taylor set off in that direction, their boots crunching against the frost with each determined step. Reaching the outcropping took longer than expected. The terrain was treacherous, littered with hidden crevices and uneven patches of ice that threatened to topple even the most careful traveler. At one point, Taylor's foot slipped on a particularly slick surface, and they fell hard onto their side. The impact sent a jolt of pain through their ribs, and for a moment they lay there, gasping for breath and staring up at the swirling sky. But the moment of vulnerability passed quickly. Gritting their teeth, they pushed themselves upright, brushed off the snow, and pressed on. Giving up was not an option. When Taylor finally reached the ice boulders, they were struck by their size and complexity. The formations towered above, their surfaces smooth and glistening, reflecting the dim light like polished glass. Between the boulders were narrow crevices and overhangs that formed natural alcoves. It wasn't perfect, but it would do. Taylor set their pack down and began to work, their movements deliberate and efficient despite the weariness weighing on them. First, they gathered loose chunks of ice and snow to construct a windbreak, piling them strategically to block the worst of the gusts. It was slow, painstaking work, and their hands ached from the cold, but the barrier gradually took shape. Next, Taylor turned their attention to insulation. Digging into their pack, they retrieved a thin thermal blanket, cutting it into strips and layering it against the inner walls of the alcove. The material wasn't much, but it would help trap body heat and create a small pocket of relative warmth. The last step was fire. Taylor crouched near the center of the alcove and carefully assembled a small pile of kindling, dry fibers, and scraps of material salvaged from their pack. Striking a spark was a challenge in the unforgiving cold, but Taylor's persistence paid off. The tiny flame flickered to life, its warmth and light an immeasurable comfort in the desolate landscape. Feeding the fire with small increments of fuel, Taylor ensured it would last through the night. As the fire crackled softly, Taylor allowed themselves a brief moment of rest. Sitting against the wall of their makeshift shelter, they unwrapped the fish and examined it more closely. Its scales shimmered in a way that seemed almost unnatural, reflecting colors that didn't exist in any familiar spectrum. The gills, now still, hinted at a physiology adapted to the extreme cold. Taylor, it was a reminder of the planet's harsh but fascinating ecosystem, a world that demanded respect for its unforgiving nature. While Taylor ate sparingly from their ration pack, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It wasn't paranoia, it was an instinct, a prickling awareness that something or someone was observing them from the shadows. They glanced around, their eyes scanning the darkness beyond the fire's glow. The icy plains were empty, devoid of any obvious movement. Yet the sensation persisted, an unshakable tension that set their nerves on edge. Suddenly, a faint noise broke the silence, a low, rhythmic hum that seemed to emanate from the ice itself. Taylor froze, every muscle tensed, their senses heightened. The sound grew louder, closer, until it became clear that it wasn't natural. It was machinery. Rising to their feet, Taylor stepped cautiously out of the alcove, their hand instinctively reaching for the knife strapped to their belt. Peering into the darkness, they spotted a faint glow in the distance, a pale blue light moving steadily toward their location. As the light drew nearer, its source became apparent. A group of CLIN students returning from their own expedition. Their bioscanners cast eerie beams across the ice, illuminating their path and scanning for any signs of organic material. Taylor relaxed slightly, though the tension didn't fully leave their body. The CLIN were not hostile, but their disdain for humans was well known. Sure enough, as they approached, their expressions shifted to ones of amusement and derision. "Well, well," one of them called out, their voice dripping with condescension. "It seems the human has decided to play with fire. How quaint." Taylor ignored the remark, focusing instead on assessing the group's intentions. The CLIN, however, seemed more interested in gloating than causing trouble. They circled the makeshift shelter, their glowing eyes flickering with disdain as they inspected Taylor's handiwork. "Primitive, as always," another muttered, shaking their head. "But I suppose even a stone can scratch glass if you hit it hard enough." Despite their words, Taylor could see the curiosity in their movements. The CLINs scanned the fish with their bioscanners, their devices emitting soft chimes as they analyzed the data. For all their arrogance, they couldn't hide their surprise at Taylor's success. Without another word, they moved on, their lights fading into the distance and leaving Taylor alone once more. Returning to the fire, Taylor sat in silence, their thoughts racing. The encounter had been brief, but it served as a reminder of the unspoken competition among the students. This was more than a survival exercise. It was a test of worth, a chance to prove what humanity could achieve in the face of doubt and derision. Tightening their grip on the knife, Taylor resolved to push forward, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. The fire crackled on, its glow a small beacon of hope in the vast, frozen expanse of Cryos. As dawn broke on the icy plains of Cryos, Taylor stirred from a restless sleep. The fire, though faint, had lasted through the night, its embers a testament to the care and patience Taylor had invested in maintaining it. The biting cold, however, was relentless. Even within the cramped shelter they had built, frost clung to every surface, and the air stung with every breath. Taylor's joints ached as they moved, the strain of the previous day evident in the stiffness of their muscles. Yet there was no time for rest. The clock was ticking, and the survival challenge demanded more than a single victory. Stepping out of the alcove, Taylor was greeted by a landscape transformed by the dim light of Krios's twin suns. The icy surface shimmered like glass, casting fragmented rainbows across the horizon. It was eerily beautiful, yet the stark emptiness served as a harsh reminder of the planet's hostility. Taylor tightened the straps of their pack, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Today, the priority was exploration. The fish they had caught was a significant achievement, but Taylor knew it wouldn't be enough. Proving survival on Krios required more than luck. It demanded adaptability and resourcefulness. The decision to venture further from the lake was not made lightly. The frozen expanse stretched endlessly in all directions, its surface broken only by occasional ridges or jagged outcroppings of ice. With no reliable landmarks and the ever-present danger of concealed crevices, each step was a calculated risk. Yet Taylor felt a growing determination to push forward. They had already demonstrated their ability to find food. Now it was time to test their limits further. As Taylor made their way across the plain, the air seemed to grow heavier, the wind carrying an almost imperceptible hum. It was a sound Taylor had noticed the day before, faint and rhythmic, as though the planet itself were alive and breathing. This time, however, it was more distinct, a low vibration that resonated through the ice underfoot. Taylor paused, crouching to press a gloved hand against the surface. The vibration was faint but unmistakable, a steady pulse that seemed to emanate from deep within the planet. Curiosity piqued, Taylor adjusted their course, following the hum toward its source. The journey was slow and arduous, the uneven terrain forcing them to navigate carefully. Along the way, Taylor noted subtle changes in the environment. The ice beneath their feet began to shift in color, transitioning from a pale blue to a deeper, almost crystalline shade. Small fissures spidered across the surface, hinting at underlying instability. Despite the potential danger, Taylor pressed on, driven by an unshakable sense of purpose. Hours passed and the hum grew louder, more defined. It was no longer a faint vibration but a resonant tone that seemed to fill the air. Taylor's pace quickened, their breath visible in the freezing air as excitement built within them. Finally, they reached the edge of a vast chasm, its depths obscured by swirling mists. The hum was deafening here, reverberating off the jagged walls of ice. Peering into the abyss, Taylor spotted faint glimmers of light far below, their colors shifting and dancing like the auroras of Earth. The sight was mesmerizing, but Taylor knew better than to linger at the edge. The chasm's walls were steep and treacherous, and the mist concealed countless dangers. Instead, Taylor set about finding a way to descend safely. Retrieving the rope from their pack, they secured it to a sturdy ice formation, testing its strength before beginning the descent. The climb was nerve-wracking, each movement requiring precision and care. The ice was slick, and the weight of their pack threatened to throw off their balance. But Taylor's determination never wavered. As they descended, the air grew noticeably warmer, a stark contrast to the freezing winds above. The mist thinned, revealing a network of tunnels carved into the chasm's walls. Their surfaces glowed faintly, the crystalline ice reflecting the shifting lights from below. Taylor chose a tunnel at random, their footsteps echoing softly as they ventured deeper into the unknown. The hum was omnipresent here, a constant backdrop that seemed to resonate in Taylor's very bones. The tunnel opened into a cavern unlike anything Taylor had ever seen. Its walls were covered in intricate patterns of glowing crystals, their light pulsating in time with the hum. In the center of the cavern was a pool of liquid, its surface shimmering with the same iridescent hues as the fish Taylor had caught. Kneeling beside the pool, Taylor reached out cautiously, dipping a gloved finger into the liquid. It was warm to the touch, and as they withdrew their hand, the liquid clung to the glove, its glow intensifying. Taylor's thoughts raced as they tried to comprehend the significance of what they had discovered. The liquid was unlike anything in their knowledge of biology or chemistry. Could it be a life form? A source of energy? The possibilities were staggering. Carefully, Taylor filled a small vial with the liquid, sealing it tightly before tucking it into their pack. This discovery was worth more than the challenge itself. It was a breakthrough that could redefine humanity's understanding of the universe. As Taylor stood, the hum suddenly shifted in pitch, its tone rising to an almost unbearable frequency. The crystals along the walls began to vibrate, their light flickering erratically. Panic surged through Taylor as they realized the cavern was becoming unstable. Without hesitation, they turned and sprinted back toward the tunnel, the ground shaking beneath their feet. The hum grew louder, more chaotic, as shards of crystal began to break free from the walls, crashing to the ground in a cascade of light. Reaching the tunnel entrance, Taylor glanced back one last time. The pool in the center of the cavern was now a seething mass of light and motion, its glow pulsating wildly. Whatever force had sustained it was destabilizing, and Taylor knew they couldn't afford to stay any longer. Climbing back up the rope was a harrowing experience, the chasm trembling with each passing moment. By the time Taylor reached the surface, they were breathless and covered in frost, but the landscape above was unchanged, as though the events below had never occurred. Taylor collapsed onto the ice, their heart pounding as they tried to process what had happened. The vial of glowing liquid felt heavy in their pack, a tangible reminder of the dangers and discoveries that Krios held. As they sat there, staring out across the frozen expanse, Taylor realized that their journey was far from over. Krios had revealed its secrets grudgingly, and Taylor was determined to uncover more, no matter the cost. The air on the surface of Krios was deceptively calm as Taylor pulled themselves out of the chasm, their arms trembling from the exertion of the climb. The events in the glowing cavern below were still fresh in their mind. Every detail of the pulsating liquid and crystalline walls burned brightly in their memory. But the urgency to move was paramount. They had barely escaped the collapsing cavern, and Taylor knew Krios had more secrets, some of which might be more dangerous than they had anticipated. Sitting on the icy ground to catch their breath, Taylor felt the faint warmth of the glowing vial inside their pack. It was their proof of what lay below, but they didn't yet fully understand its significance. Taylor glanced around, the barren expanse of Krios stretching endlessly in every direction. The sun was now higher in the sky, casting long, sharp shadows across the jagged ice. The brief reprieve from the chasm's chaos gave Taylor time to reassess their priorities. Survival was still the primary goal, but the discovery of the glowing liquid had shifted something fundamental. This wasn't just a test anymore. It had become a chance to bring something back that no one had seen before. Determined, Taylor stood and began moving toward higher ground, scanning for anything that could serve as a vantage point. From above, they could map out the surrounding terrain and perhaps locate other areas worth exploring. The terrain was unforgiving, with patches of thin ice that cracked beneath their weight and concealed fissures that required careful navigation. Each step was deliberate, their boots crunching against the surface as the wind picked up, carrying faint whispers of snowflakes that clung to their visor. After a grueling climb up a steep ridge, Taylor reached a plateau overlooking the frozen expanse. The view was both breathtaking and unsettling. To the west, the frozen lake where they had caught the fish shimmered faintly in the distance. To the east, the vast chasm they had just escaped was marked by a dark, jagged line, its edges barely visible. But it was to the north that Taylor's attention was drawn. Far off on the horizon, a series of irregular shapes disrupted the otherwise flat landscape. They appeared to be structures, though their forms were difficult to discern through the haze of frost and distance. Taylor's heart quickened. Could those shapes be remnants of a civilization, natural formations, or something entirely alien? Whatever they were, the possibility of further discoveries was impossible to ignore. Adjusting their pack and ensuring the vial was secure, Taylor began the trek toward the northern horizon. The journey would take hours, but Taylor was fueled by a growing sense of purpose. As the trek continued, the environment began to change subtly. The ice underfoot became rougher, its surface etched with strange, swirling patterns that looked almost like runes. The air grew heavier, the biting cold replaced by an odd, electric sensation that prickled against Taylor's skin even through their thermal suit. The hum, which had been a constant presence in the chasm, returned faintly, resonating through the ground beneath their feet. It was as if the planet itself was alive, guiding them towards something hidden just beyond their reach. When Taylor finally reached the edge of the formations, the scale of what lay before them became clear. Massive spires of ice jutted from the ground, their surfaces smooth and impossibly reflective. They rose hundreds of feet into the air, their tops disappearing into the low-hanging clouds. At their bases were smaller, dome-like structures, arranged in a circular pattern around a central clearing. The arrangement was too precise to be natural. These were not random formations, but the remnants of something intentional, perhaps even intelligent. Approaching cautiously, Taylor examined the nearest dome. Its surface was covered in intricate carvings that glowed faintly, similar to the crystals in the cavern. The patterns pulsed rhythmically, their light growing brighter as Taylor moved closer. Reaching out a gloved hand, Taylor touched the surface, and the light surged, illuminating the dome from within. Startled, Taylor stepped back, watching as the dome emitted a low hum, its glow spreading outward in waves that connected it to the surrounding structures. The central clearing came to life. A thin column of light shot up from the ground, splitting the sky and scattering the clouds above. The hum intensified, resonating in Taylor's chest and making the air feel charged. For a moment, Taylor hesitated, unsure whether to continue. The situation had shifted from exploration to something far more unpredictable. But curiosity and determination pushed them forward. Stepping into the clearing, Taylor was immediately struck by the shift in atmosphere. The air was warmer, almost humid, and the ground beneath their feet had a strange, spongy texture, as though it were alive. The column of light pulsed, and as Taylor approached, shapes began to form within it. Indistinct at first, but gradually taking on clarity. They appeared to be holographic projections, images of beings that bore no resemblance to any species Taylor had ever encountered. Their forms were tall and elongated, with shimmering, translucent bodies and eyes that seemed to hold galaxies within them. The projections moved with purpose, their gestures deliberate, as though they were communicating. Taylor watched in awe, trying to decipher the meaning behind their actions. It wasn't language in any traditional sense, but the patterns of their movements and the way the light shifted suggested some form of intent. One of the figures turned toward Taylor, its gaze locking onto them despite being a projection. Taylor felt a strange pull, a connection that defied explanation. The figure raised an arm and pointed toward the vial in Taylor's pack. Its gesture slow and deliberate. Understanding dawned on Taylor. The liquid from the cavern was connected to this place, to these beings. It wasn't just a random discovery, it was a key, a link to something far greater. Taylor carefully retrieved the vial, holding it up to the light. As they did, the figure's gestures grew more animated, its movements faster and more intricate. The other projections joined in, their forms swirling around Taylor in a dance of light and energy. The column of light surged, and the ground beneath Taylor trembled. A sound unlike anything they had ever heard filled the air, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through their very being. The spires around the clearing began to emit beams of light, converging on the vial in Taylor's hand. The liquid inside glowed brighter, its color shifting and swirling in response. It was as if the entire structure was alive, reacting to the presence of the substance Taylor had brought. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the phenomenon ceased. The projections faded, the lights dimmed, and the hum subsided into silence. Taylor stood alone in the clearing, the vial still glowing faintly in their hand. Whatever had just occurred was beyond their understanding, but one thing was clear. They had uncovered something of extraordinary significance. This place, these beings, and the liquid were all part of a larger puzzle, one that Taylor was determined to solve. Turning away from the clearing, Taylor began the journey back, their mind racing with questions. What was this place? Who were the beings they had seen? And, most importantly, what role did they now play in the unfolding mystery of Krios? Each step toward their shelter carried the weight of newfound knowledge and the promise of more discoveries to come. The journey back to the shelter was arduous, but Taylor moved with a renewed sense of purpose. The encounter in the northern clearing had shifted everything they thought they understood about Krios. What had begun as a survival exercise had transformed into an encounter with something ancient, intelligent, and entirely beyond human comprehension. The glowing vial in their pack felt heavier now, as though it carried the weight of the secrets they had unearthed. Every step across the frozen terrain seemed to echo with the hum they had heard in the cavern and the clearing, a persistent reminder that Krios was alive in ways they had never anticipated. The landscape was eerily silent, save for the crunch of Taylor's boots against the ice. The wind, which had previously been a near-constant presence, had stilled, leaving an almost oppressive quiet. The silence heightened Taylor's awareness of their surroundings, every shadow and glimmer catching their eye. The strange patterns etched into the ice earlier had grown more frequent and complex, swirling into intricate designs that seemed deliberate, almost like an ancient language carved into the planet itself. The thought sent a chill down Taylor's spine, and they quickened their pace. As they approached the ridge where their shelter was hidden, Taylor paused to take one last look at the horizon. The spires of the northern clearing were barely visible in the distance, their faint glow obscured by the ever-present frost. Taylor felt a pang of reluctance to leave them behind. Whatever was out there, it wasn't meant for just a fleeting visit. There was more to discover, more to understand, but for now, survival took precedence. Turning away, Taylor descended the slope toward the shelter, their mind racing with questions they had no answers for. The shelter was exactly as Taylor had left it, a small alcove in the jagged ice, protected by the windbreak they had painstakingly constructed. The fire had long since died out, leaving only faint traces of ash on the ground. Taylor knelt to reignite it, their hands steady despite the exhaustion that tugged at them. The glow of the flames brought immediate comfort, their warmth seeping through the layers of their suit. Sitting by the fire, Taylor unwrapped the vial and held it up to the light. The liquid inside continued to swirl and shimmer, its colors shifting in patterns that seemed almost purposeful. It was beautiful and unnerving in equal measure, a reminder of how little Taylor truly understood about what they had found. As Taylor stared into the vial, a strange sensation began to take hold. It started as a faint buzzing at the edge of their consciousness, like a distant sound they couldn't quite hear. Slowly, it grew stronger, a rhythm that seemed to align with the hum of the cavern and the clearing. Taylor's grip on the vial tightened as their vision blurred, the world around them fading into an indistinct haze. They tried to focus, to ground themselves, but the sensation was overwhelming, pulling them into something far beyond their control. When Taylor's vision cleared, they were no longer in the shelter. The icy landscape of Krios had been replaced by a vast expanse of light and shadow, an endless void that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions. The air was thick with energy, pulsating in waves that resonated through Taylor's entire being. In the distance, faint shapes began to materialize, figures similar to those Taylor had seen in the clearing, their forms shimmering and translucent. They moved with a grace that defied gravity, their gestures deliberate and mesmerizing. One of the figures approached, its gaze fixed on Taylor. Though it had no discernible features, Taylor felt an undeniable sense of connection, as if the being could see into the depths of their soul. It raised an arm and extended a hand, palm upturned. Taylor hesitated, unsure of what was being asked of them, but as the hum grew louder, the answer became clear. With trembling hands, Taylor held out the vial, offering it to the figure. The being accepted the vial with a fluid motion, its translucent fingers curling around it. The liquid inside seemed to react immediately, its colors intensifying until the vial itself dissolved into light. The energy surged outward, enveloping Taylor in a wave of warmth and brilliance. In that moment, Taylor felt an overwhelming sense of understanding, not through words or images, but through emotions and sensations that transcended language. They saw glimpses of a civilization that had once thrived on Cryos, beings who had harnessed the planet's energy to achieve extraordinary feats. But they had paid a price, their ambition leading to a catastrophic collapse that left Cryos as it was now, a frozen wasteland with remnants of its former glory hidden beneath the ice. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving Taylor back in the shelter, the fire crackling softly at their side. The vial was gone, but Taylor felt its absence more as a presence, a lingering connection to what they had experienced. The hum, which had once been a constant backdrop, was now silent. Cryos felt different, as though the planet itself had acknowledged Taylor's role in uncovering its secrets. As the hours passed, Taylor prepared for their return to the rendezvous point where the survival exercise would end. The journey was long and grueling, but Taylor moved with a sense of purpose, their thoughts consumed by what they had seen. They knew the others wouldn't believe them, not without proof. But Taylor also understood that the truth of Cryos wasn't something that could be easily explained. It was something that had to be experienced, felt, and understood on a level far deeper than words. When Taylor finally reached the shuttle, the other students were already there, their faces etched with exhaustion and frustration. Professor Zaire stood at the center, her piercing gaze scanning the group. She said nothing as Taylor approached, but her expression shifted slightly, a flicker of curiosity crossing her otherwise stern features. Taylor met her gaze and held it, the weight of their discovery pressing heavily on their shoulders. As the shuttle lifted off, carrying the group away from Cryos, Taylor stared out the window at the frozen expanse below. The spires of the northern clearing were no longer visible, hidden beneath the swirling frost, but Taylor knew they were still there, waiting for someone brave, or foolish, enough to uncover their secrets. Cryos had revealed only a fraction of its mysteries, and Taylor couldn't shake the feeling that they would one day return. For now, they carried the memory of Cryos with them, a reminder of what humanity could achieve when faced